So this happens once in a while. So, right. So with hyper personalization, right? So if you're not familiar with the concept of hyper personalization, this is where we kick on the personalization into the next gear, right? So this is where we don't simply personalize just the basic ad hoc if A then B, right? Or even predictive personalization is kind of a basic personalization these days, right? So the type of personalization that we have in XP, for instance, where we try to profile a person, right, towards a certain segment, and then we guess what kind of content that they would be interested in. So these are all these are table stakes these days. So hyper personalization is modifying content, modifying components, modifying copy assets slightly, sometimes dramatically, sometimes slightly on a large number of things. Um, for instance, making decision based on the time of the day, the weather that's surrounding, right? And the type of audience that's consuming our content. So for instance, if we profiled a person, let's say if we're talking about financial space, right? If we profiled a person as someone who is an investor, right? And personal investor versus a retail organization, right? A retail investor. These are two different people. They could be consuming the same type of article. With hyper-personalization, we would tailor the verbiage, the tonality of that article to them, right? We change CTAs, just simple links and button text on the page to tailor to that audience. So this is basically personalization on steroids, right? And then for experimentation, when we start scaling experimentation, we're talking about creating multiple variations of content, presentation, components, right? Buttons, tweaking the wording on those, right? Even experimenting with tonality, right? Experimenting with verbiage towards specific audience groups, right? So these are all the things that that require a lot of effort to one, create, to test, right? So the overhead that came with those two has been cost prohibitive for a lot of organizations, and Gen AI has democratized both of those things. So now we are able to do hyper personalization and experimentation at low cost with Gen AI, right? So, so what I'll do is I'll quickly show you guys some examples of these two in each category, right? So reduction effort for lengthy tasks and automating operations, and increasing engagement and capturing more leads, right? So first, I'll show you the lengthy task. So this is a case study. If you've ever shopped at Costco and had to replace the battery at Costco, you may be familiar with interstate batteries. That's the only car battery that Costco carries. Whether you have a truck or a car, interstate batteries has an exclusive right with Costco. And what's interesting, the company has been going through dramatic growth right after COVID. What happened was when people stopped driving cars during the shutdown, right? What happens when you don't drive your car for a while and then you start getting back into it when the country reopened, right? So batteries die when you don't use them. So when the country was, well, the world was reopening, right? People started getting back to their cars. Their batteries were out, which created the massive demand for new batteries. So their business exponentially grew. So one of the problems that they started dealing with is that they couldn't catch up on the marketing side in creating new landing pages for all the distributors that they had for SEO purposes. So they grew to over 75,000 distributor locations in the US alone, and they were trying to create a landing page for each location. They partnered up with a digital agency, with an ad agency that they've been producing SEO-friendly content for a year, and after a year, they've only gone through about 1,500 of those. Right, so that's a tedious, costly process. So we've done with solutioned it with Azure AI on top of Microsoft and Sitecore XP instance to auto create those 75,000 pages with SEO optimized content tailored to local language, tailored to local directions and sites that are close to the distributor locations as points of reference, and also user-friendly content specifically. So mentioning some of the bits and pieces around local information. So really making that content localized, and all in the matter of 9 weeks, right? So going from taking a year, right, to create 1,500 locations to knocking out this 75,000 within just a matter of 9 weeks, that's massive cost savings. So you can start thinking about, for your clients, if you're working for a vendor, right? So if you're you're working with the platform directly, if you're not working for a Sitecore partner, but you are on the client side, start thinking about those things in terms of automating lengthy tasks. Like what are the tasks that Gen AI could help you with, for instance. Now, this is a straightforward example, right? Copy generation. There could be other things like translation, for instance, right? So that's another area where Gen AI can be easily used to translate for instance, English copy into any other copy out there, even with respect to industry-specific dictionary and taxonomy, right? So all these things are can be respected. So that's one example, right? So another example, and I got to give credit when credit is due. So I'll show you guys a demo if I still have the login. Mo, you may have seen this demo in Content Hub for campaign generation. So if you are familiar with Content Hub, Sitecore Content Hub, like one of the or Sitecore, what's now known Sitecore Content Hub operations, right? One piece of the operation still is the CMP, right? The content marketing platform. That's where we can create create content marketing campaigns, right? Where we can plan our campaigns, create strategy boards, map out content, create content, manage all that with workflows, syndicate that out, and then bring the analytics back, right? So with the project management tools around that. Now, so that's the concept, high-level concept of the content marketing platform. So if you've ever had to set up a content marketing platform, one of the things you may have done is set up a strategy board. So this is a view that content marketers use when they map out the type of content that needs to be created for the content marketing campaign. And usually what happens is you have a pivot table of, let's say, channels per target audience, right? And usually companies have their own templates, right? So they're well aware of who their target audience is. They are aware of what works and what doesn't, or so they think. However, right, with the advancements in technologies, you may know yourself, you constantly pick up new channels of that you use to consume information, right? Whether it's learning, whether it's just reading up on things, or pure entertainment, right? Your channels evolve gradually, right? So just using the same template over and over again just doesn't work, right? And it's challenging for marketers to try something new because it's going to be a guess for the most part, because companies usually don't track the effectiveness of pieces of content across different channels and what works where, right? So they, in a lot of cases, content marketing teams are afraid to change things, and because they don't really know why they're doing those things. They've inherited the formula, right? And they came from someone else, and they're afraid if they change it, it's not going to work. It's going to impact their KPIs, and the whole thing is going to go down, right? So they're sort of throwing spaghetti at the wall and hoping it sticks, right? And if it doesn't stick, they blame someone else who passed the formula on to them, right? So just like in an infomercial, right? But there's a better way to do that now, right? It with Gen AI. So if we feed certain types of information to Gen AI, it's capable of generating, it's capable of recommending content types and specific content to include in those content types per channel, per target audience, right? So now instead of having to guess or just reuse the same template, right? They may not be even effective or working anymore. Now we can tap into the power of generative AI that's been trained on the information out there, and it knows what types of people consume what types of content, right? So it can recommend which content to produce, which type of content to produce, let's say a social article, for instance, or a blog post, and for what target audience, right? So now so what I'm going to do, I'm going to see, looks like the instance is either going through an upgrade right now, or something is changing on the back end. So I'll hold this till the end, and let's see if it comes back up before we're done, and then I'll show you guys what that looks like. So ultimately, there is an integration. Just be aware of this one in case we don't get to the demo. this specific Gen AI integration allows us to, one, map out content by providing certain information about the campaign. Let's say the channels, the target audiences, right? The strategic theme, the mission, the vision, right? The marketing goals, the KPIs that we're trying to drive, right? And based on all that information gets sent off to Gen AI, Azure AI, and then it comes back with a recommendation for a set of pieces of content, right? And we can configure the number of content items, content pieces that it can be limited to, and it'll map it out per audience, and then also help us generate content for those content pieces, right? So now all of a sudden we've turned days and sometimes weeks of work for one, debating and strategizing around what should go where, and then creating that content into literally a matter of minutes, right? A matter of a couple minutes to be precise, right? So significant improvements and changes. So this is pretty remarkable. Now, another thing that we at Altudo developed ourselves as we were playing around with Gen AI is a tool called Altudo Engage. And you may have seen that demoed by Subu in other user groups, so I'm not going to go into too much detail here. But what I do want to mention is this is an interface similar to a chat experience that you can have with ChatGPT. The big difference is that it uses Azure OpenAI behind the scenes, and it's fed content from Sitecore DXP, right? Whether it's XM Cloud or XMXP behind the scenes, but then it's also fed with content that is coming from other data sources. Now that's the interesting part. So now, not only we can provide quick Q&A or answers or engage users around the content with Gen AI conversational capabilities on the content that's stored on our website, we can also start driving value out of the content that's been hidden away, let's say in SharePoint, somewhere on the intranet. That's not really proprietary knowledge, but it's something that's good for people to know. For instance, customer service sheets, Q&As, the knowledge material that customer service gets trained on, right? If you're in a manufacturing industry, let's say discrete manufacturing, all the spec sheets, right? The inventory information, all those things that are hidden away in PDFs like manuals and spec sheets for specific products can be consumed by Gen AI now, and that information can be exposed to users. So you can start asking questions about how do you assemble things, right? Is it better to do X or Y with a certain product, for instance, right? So now we can get really sophisticated and engaging users in the conversation, right? Not only we can engage them more, and we can also give them more precise information, right? We can feed them inventory around products, right? Whether, recommendations around certain combinations of products. Let's say if you have a product configurator on the website, we can provide recommendations of the best combinations, for instance, right? If you're thinking, let's say bicycles, like, all right, Cannondale, right? Customizations, what parts fit better together, for instance, recommended part combinations and modules, for instance. So those are all the things that we can start doing on the fly. And the accuracy with which these types of recommendations are given is pretty remarkable. Now, it's important to tweak the temperature on some of those things, right? So it doesn't get carried away with making things up, right? Because it's AI's job is not to provide the right answer. Gen AI's job, right, is to generate an answer, just any answer, really. So in a lot of cases, when it can't provide an answer, let's say ChatGPT, right, when on certain topics, it's been configured in the way so it doesn't provide the answer on those topics. It has been trained not to do so, right? But ultimately, it's going to try to, unless we train it not to, right? So, and sometimes it does get carried away. So that's where we got to fine tune it just a little bit, especially when it comes to sensitive industries like healthcare, right? For instance, we're working with a client where we're completely staying away from certain topics because we do not want to touch certain topics with a 10-foot pole, right? So if they're asking questions that make it sound like they may have an emergency, or they're asking questions about certain sensitive subjects, the recommendations, the model is trained to ask them to call right, to call in the customer service, call the hospital or the doctor or 911. So those are some of the interesting use cases. Some other interesting use cases with this type of experience would be lead capturing. So for instance, if we have high value information, right, that's been hidden away that normally you would have to, let's say, call customer service for, we can expose that information, but we can ask users to provide additional information, for instance, to either log in, create an account, or just simply provide an email, right? So this is a spin on gated forms, for instance, right? So if we're trying to capture leads in exchange for, let's say, a white paper, an ebook, or some valuable, really information, that is an easy way to do that, right? So we can tag certain assets that and allow GenAI only to expose, let's say, so much information out of a PDF, and for certain sections in there, for instance, we can ask it to trigger, and prompt the user for an email address, for instance. So, and really, this type of experience is likely going to take over search. In fact, intranets are already moving in that direction. Intranets have gone away. Some of the modern intranets that we've been working with some of our clients on are going away from search. They're going to a chat experience, chat. So, and the chat experience provides references to documents, gives answers. The accuracy with which Azure OpenAI is able to provide answers based on our research is about 80 to 85%. And that's compared to search engines that are about 70, 75% accuracy, right? So that's a significant difference, especially when you're working with large amounts of content. So I'm gonna just jump in real quick into I'm going to skip the architecture. So this is the architecture. If you're curious how this tool works behind the scenes, so this is how the flow works, right? So we're calling if you're on the technical side of the house, we're calling the embedding API with Azure OpenAI to generate the embeddings. Then for the model, we're recruiting cognitive search to index documents that are coming from the blob storage. Some documents are coming from SharePoint, for instance. We have that whole system integrated with Sitecore XM, XP, and Order Cloud at the same time, providing information about inventory, about products, recommendations, pricing information, pricing changes, for instance, and discounts, things like that. So it's very interesting. There's a lot there that can be done with this type of chat experience. Now, so is there anyone who hasn't used GenAI on this call, actually? Or have you guys all been involved with it in some shape or form? Okay. So you might be familiar with prompt engineering. So I'm going to cut down. I'm going to just cut to the chase, right? So here is some of the best practices that you may have found yourself, may have also read about. These are the things that I do all the time when I write prompts. My prompts are generally pretty lengthy. I tend to run out of tokens every time I go to town on it. So, but some of the recommendations here is when you're asking GenAI to help you with something, set the right context. And the best way I like to think about it is, imagine if you're talking to a consultant, right? A human consultant. What information you think that person is going to need to be able to give you the best and most accurate answer, right? So this is where that context helps you provide the right amount of information to GenAI for it to give you the most accurate answer. So set the context. Either ask the model to play the role, right? Or explain what you're trying to do, what your role is, right? And provide as much relevant detail as possible. Ask the GPT to help you improve your prompt. Right? Iterating. Ask it to ask you questions that would help it give you a more accurate answer, right? So don't simply rely on your own knowledge. Ask the model itself to help you improve your own prompt, right? I've already mentioned ask following up questions. If you're working with a digital reference, let's say if you're asking the model to generate a picture, for instance, or if you're asking a model to generate code for a component, right? HTML, front-end code, you can use a reference. visual reference. So take a screenshot of what you're talking about, and in ChatGPT or in Copilot, for instance, Windows Copilot is so handy. It works really well with kind of copy paste of the imagery. So if I don't get a good answer in the Copilot, then I take a look at others. But different models specialize in different things, right? So Copilot, Windows Copilot in general is business focused, right? ChatGPT is conversational, right? It's also actually good for writing code. Gemini from Google, for instance, right? That one is focused on providing the most accurate answers, right? So every tool out there, ChatGPT, still has its own strengths and weaknesses. So when you're playing around with those things, just keep in mind that you're not, you're probably going to be better off taking the same prompt and posting it into multiple tools and see what gets you the most accurate answer. I found that the same prompt, let's say with Gemini, that could give me a really accurate answer with Google, gives me something super generic in Copilot. And sometimes it's vice versa, right? So just be aware of those things. And really remember that, Gen AI is here to answer a question, not necessarily give you the accurate answer. And here's a perfect example. I asked it to translate "this food is delicious" into dog language, right? And then I asked it to, and I said it wasn't very accurate, and I asked it to be more polite, and it gave me a more polite version, right? So this is an example of those things that Gen AI will try to give you the answer, right? So keep in mind when it comes to important things, especially when you're putting your money on the line, right? Just do your own validation and verification of the facts that the Gen AI gives you, right? Because that temperature might be turned all the way up, and you might be getting things that aren't real. So I'll stop on that. Let me actually see. So I think the Content Hub instance has loaded. Let me go ahead and pull it up here, and I'll show you guys what that looks like. Okay, 1 second. Page is loading right now. All right, let me reshare, and I'll show you what I was talking about. Okay, let me know if you can see Content Hub. Content Hub operations window, Sonos brand campaign.
Yes, we can. We'll see.
All right, so right now we have content pre-populated, right? So what I'm going to do is, let me actually select all my monitors, or select all. I'm going to go ahead and delete this. So this is an example where we have a campaign already pre-configured, right? So I'm just going to reuse an existing campaign. But if we went back to campaign creation, we would be able to create a new campaign, populate the information. I'm not going to do that for the sake of time, but you can see some of the parameters that are configured here. That's the information that's displayed on the left. Let me refresh. All right, so everything's gone. So normally we'd have to do this manually, but what I'm going to do here in Content Hub, just click Generate Content, right? And now what's going to happen is Content Hub is taking all this information on the left around this specific content marketing campaign. So it's taking the audiences that we've configured, right? And we can update these, right, on the fly. For instance, takes the channels that we've configured, takes the title into account, the theme, the mission, right, of the marketing campaign, the vision, marketing framework, so the theme, the marketing goals, right? So it takes all that information. In fact, we can treat these fields as parts of our prompt, right? So this is where prompt engineering comes back into play, right? So when we're configuring these types of things, and if you are working for a Sitecore partner, have to set something up similar to this, just keep in mind that these fields and these types of things should be treated as prompts. So the more we can do to help our users to input better information into these fields, the better generation they're going to get, the better experience they're going to get, right? So add validation as much as possible to these things. But now you can see it started generating content, right? So pretty soon it's going to continue, finish up generating content and map it out per user audience. So you can see it's just a matter of 1 or 2 minutes. We're now able to generate new content, and we're now also able to, let me move that out. It just popped up a new window. If we take a look at the social post, let's see. See, we're generating content on the fly for social posts, right? So with a brief. So now you can start thinking about how much we can automate with those things. Now, this just cut weeks and weeks of effort down to just a couple of minutes. So this is pretty remarkable. And again, I got to give credit where credit is due. So Brian Bishop, if you're watching this, thanks a lot for making this demo possible. So, all right, any questions, guys? All righty. Okay. Mo, on this note, I will pass it on over to you.
Sure thing. Hi, everyone. So let me share my screen and you need to give me access to share the screen.
Yep. Let me see here. That would help, wouldn't it?
Okay. So let me start off by just talking about what I'm going to be talking about today. So we all have heard of ChatGPT, OpenAI, LLM, generative AI, and all these cool things. And the reason being is not because AI is something new. AI started in the 70s. Even large language models have been alive and well for quite some time with GPT-1 and GPT-2. But what really changed was with GPT-3, we came to know something called ChatGPT, which is an interface that democratized the idea of large language models. So everyone could just get their hands on a large language model and play around with it, which is why everyone started talking about it, whether it's news agencies or movie stars. Everyone was just talking about what ChatGPT can do. And that's why everyone got super excited and ultimately why this happened. Gen AI is estimated to contribute about $4.4 trillion in annual global productivity. And if we look at it, 75% of the total annual impact of generative AI is in sales, marketing, product R&D, customer operations, software engineering. And there is just so much you can do there, and there's just so much excitement as well. But I want to go one step further and talk about something called generative UI. And like Vasiliy was mentioning around the whole idea of people not using intranets anymore or wanting chatbots instead of intranets, that's really a good example of this, because when we think about generative AI UI, it's how do we change the experience for the user? And I'm going to read this out of Nielsen Norman Group. It's in the future, generative UI will dynamically create customized user interfaces in real time. This shift will force an outcome-oriented design approach where designers prioritize user goals and define constraints for AI to operate within rather than design discrete interface elements. What does that mean? It ultimately means today, why have so many people, or why do a lot of people talk about chatbots for intranets, for instance? Because one thing intranets do is too much. They just have a bunch of stuff in there. And if I'm looking for a specific thing, I don't want to browse 20 pages talking about the company and the CEO's latest updates and the mission and vision of the company. I'd rather get to when is the next holiday so I know when my team's going to be available. And that's really what generative UI, well, first chatbot started with, which is just asking a question, getting an answer. But as we move forward with AI and with generative AI, we're starting to see this idea of it's not about just getting an answer, a text answer. I want the whole component to be the answer. I want, when I say I want to submit my next holiday, I don't want it to ask me 500 questions about my holiday. When does it start? When does it end? And so on. I just want that form in there that has been optimized really, really well to be there and just for me to fill it in and just submit. And that's really what generative UI is going to be about, is that move away from a single view for everyone. So it's that same interface for everyone, to personalized interfaces for each user. It might be because of some, like an accessibility reason or disability reason, or it might be because of their personal preferences, but it also might be because of a specific outcome or a specific outcome they want to achieve. So when I ask about something like holidays, it comes up with the user experience that fulfills that UI, that experience for me. I'm gonna show a demo of personalization first before we go into Gen UI and how personalization with generative AI can change. This is, again, credit where credit's due. This is Sarah O'Reilly, who created this demo from our sales engineering team. And you'll see here, I'm kind of browsing this site. And as I'm browsing, AI is identifying what I'm looking for, so my intent. So I'm looking for snorkeling here, and then I'm looking for singles. And then as I browse, it's starting to identify what I need. And based on that, it can create this article on the fly. So you'll see here that it's going to realize that I'm looking for snorkeling for singles in Asia, and it's going to start creating an article for me. Now, it's not like going to ChatGPT and asking it to create an article. It's actually kind of like Lego pieces, where it's using from Content Hub my atomic content pieces and merging them together in my brand tone of voice. And that's where, again, experience doesn't have to be a chatbot. When we talk about generative UI and generative experiences, it doesn't necessarily have to be through a chatbot. So I'm going to try to show other experiences as well. Same thing here. This is a e-commerce scenario we prepared, where you can go in first. Again, you're seeing just a normal e-commerce site, but you have this idea on the side here, try on, where I can choose my body type, the most relevant body type. And as I switch the body type, it's going to change the actual content for me, because what we're doing is we have all these different assets in Content Hub that have been created by an AI model, and we're able to get the right one based on the personalization preferences of the user and remember it, so that when I go into like search and say, what are fashion trends of 2024, we're using semantic search to get this result. But I can also follow up on that and say, for example, I'm going out for dinner, which should I choose? And it will filter down the ones that are fitting for dinner, again, using generative UI. And then I can even further refine it with Copilot. So I can ask what accessory go well with this, and Copilot can answer. And I think I wouldn't be complete with demos without showing a chatbot, because we have to, right? So I'm going to show actually two scenarios. One is a demo we created where I can ask things. This was actually for DX Dubai. We created this idea where I can ask things like, get me the latest 5 news articles. And it gets me these as blog posts as or articles or news articles, so it shows them as these widgets. Now if I ask a different question like I want Italian restaurant for dinner, it's going to get me a completely different experience that fits with that request. If I ask where are Sitecore offices in the US, I'm getting a completely different experience, because it understands the intent and can visualize it based on that understanding. Now I'm going to jump to another demo that we did not create. This is actually created by Vercel. So again, same concept of generative UI, but this is for a flight scenario. So if I go and say, this flight's flying from San Francisco to Rome, you'll see here it got me this flight widget. I could just stop there, or I can click on something and it's going to create, again, another widget for me. So when I chose which flight, it created my seat selection widget. And then I can choose, what do I want to do next? Do I want to proceed to checkout, or do I want to list hotels and make a reservation? Why not list hotels? I'd like to get a hotel as well. And again, it's showing that experience. I click on one, and then I can go into payment and submit. Now, imagine this same experience. I could have started it completely different by saying something like, show me hotels for booking. I might not even want a flight. I might want to just get hotels. So based on my journey, the user experience is changing to match my journey, whatever it may be. And this is really what generative UI is all about, is that personalized experience where it's really about your outcome rather than about what the company thinks is best for you, or what the brand thinks is best for you. So you can imagine how this will change a lot of things. It will change how we do SEO, for instance. It will change how we do page analytics. It's no longer about pages. It's about your customer journey and the outcomes and goals you've put forth within that journey and how they're being managed. Now, we, of course, at Sitecore support that with CDP, but the great thing that gets me really excited is it's supported with XP, like with the whole idea of goals and defining goals in the XP world was there as well, which for me was way ahead of its time. But it's kind of interesting to see how that would apply in scenarios like this generative UI. I'm going to stop for a second just to see if there are any questions, and then I'll show another cool demo that I did not make.
Was that Vercel app? Was that real? Like, I
Yes.
mean,
Well, it's a demo app, but yeah, I can send you the URL for it.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. That's very cool.
It's open source, by the way, so you can just go in and get the code for it as well.
Nice.
Yeah, like if you click on the GitHub link here, it's going to go to that GitHub Gemini chatbot.
Very cool.
Now, one of the things that I personally believe is mobile apps have been broken for a very long time. Like if we think about it, in theory, we have an app store with hundreds of thousands of apps, but in reality, the most successful apps are the ones that broke the experience. So they changed the whole experience that others had done previously. So if we think about Uber, for instance, or if we think about any of these things, they came and changed the experience altogether to something completely new. And with that, I want to kind of show a demo that was from the React conference by Evan Bacon. It's Export Router. So for everyone, Export Router is this new idea that is in React where it replaces the concepts of React Native with writing React code rather than React Native code for your native mobile app. And Export Router would be the one managing how to convert your ultimately React code into the different mobile apps or different native scenarios for you. And so I'll click here and say list new movies, for instance, or he'll click that. And it shows you that you're trending movies, just like I showed in our demo. But the cool thing here is as I click on one, you'll see it shows find Showtime cast crew. And this is an iPhone menu. So it already is integrated with native experiences. And I can interact with it through that native experience as well. But as I start doing other things, so show me movies starring Owen, and I can say, for example, create an event. And you'll see here it's integrated with my event calendar, my actual iPhone event calendar. So I can just go in from here and I see the calendar. I can just schedule it directly into my calendar here. And then I can ask something else like what's Charlie's phone number? And it's going to be able to go and hit my phone directory, my phone, my contacts on my phone and get that person. And I can even chat with them. So I can go in and say, send them a message and it will send an SMS message to them directly from that experience. So it can revolutionize how mobile apps work ultimately to the extent that the widgets, and I'll stop here for a second because I want to talk about this, that the widgets that we have today on iPhone can not just be where I have to go to the left side and use these widgets, which haven't really been that successful or adopted. And if for anyone, I mean, these widgets that kind of show up when you go on your iPhone. But can you imagine if these widgets become part of a global search or a global chatbot on your mobile where you can just say, I want to do X, Y, and Z, and you no longer actually have to open any of the apps. As long as the app plugin is installed, you get to get that service from the app through a specific kind of element. And of course, they wanted to show off the idea of having a 3D map directly from there as well into that chatbot. So I can go in and see all these different locations on a 3D map and I can book an Uber. Well, first I'll check the weather, of course, but then I can book an Uber to go there and it's going to go and request the Uber from the Uber app directly from this single chatbot. So again, can you imagine how this can change the experience where I no longer need to ever open the Uber app or maybe my McDonald's app. I can just go in and chat with my mobile phone, my iPhone, for instance, or my website, or even my search, whether it's Copilot or Google Search Generative Experience, and I just get the answer with the widgets, and you no longer have control over the whole experience. You just have control over the widgets that are important to you. A great example of this, I would want to say, is I want to bet if I go to, for example, United Airlines as a site, how many people have actually gone below this banner? Probably not a lot, right? Like no one, I don't even know what's there. I've visited this site so many times, but I don't know what's under there because really the most important real estate for them is this widget, right? It's that ability to find, book your flights. And that's why they made everything in here. So you go book, you check your flight status, you check in, you see your trips, all from within one single location. And because they realize people are not scrolling down, their ads are just behind it as well. So that's where experience can change because they already know that. They've already figured out that it's one widget that is their whole site, really. For most people, this is the most valuable real estate or the most valuable widget they have. So can you imagine if they start having this widget where you can just go to iPhone and ask it, I want to book a flight. This is the widget that comes up. Or if you search in Google, so when I go and say, book a flight with United Airlines, instead of getting all these sponsors, and instead of getting this, which is not owned by them, it's owned by Google, I can get their own widget here as part of the search generative experience, and ultimately change the way they interact and the way they are able to get that value proposition. One app to rule them all, indeed. So I tried not to take too long just to make sure that we have time for everyone else, but I do want to open it for questions if anyone has any questions about anything.
So is that where you think things are going and they're going to get consolidated into a single interface?
I think there are some experiences that are going to go to that, not every experience, but I think it's going to be a mandated experience for most, at least for your top level value propositions. Like, I don't think it's going to be where, oh, websites are going to vanish, just like mobiles never took away websites. But I do think it's a new channel where you're going to have to prioritize what we call that goal-oriented experiences and really define your goals much, much better. Because today a lot of sites don't personalize, not because they can't, it's because they haven't done enough research about their personas, but what their personas are really looking for. And I've actually have a personal story around that. So when I was buying my car, I wanted to buy a new electric car. And I've bought Volkswagen for my entire life. But as I was like searching online, I went and tried Copilot and asked Copilot, and Copilot got me all this comparative research directly in there, showing me all the different products. And Volkswagen, because they did not show their data enough around ID4, I didn't even consider it. And I went and bought a Tesla. But then after I bought it, that's when Volkswagen finally found out that I was actually searching EVs and called me up and started trying to convince me with the ID4. That was a loss for them because they did not create this new experience for this new channel, whereas Tesla, for instance, and others had done that.
Very interesting. What do you envision as the future of websites?
I think a lot of that journey-based website. So think of the homepage will be very personalized to each and every user, and is going to be honest about it. Like, yes, AI is going to be there at the start, and this was something I always tell our customers is you're going to have to tell your customers this is AI generated. But in in further years when AI is just everywhere, you're not going to need to say that. Like today, every single search platform uses AI in some way, shape, or form. Do they mention this is AI generated search or has been delivered by vector embeddings for semantic? They don't need to because it's just a given, right? And I think the same thing will happen in the future where when people trust AI enough, it's just going to do the work without anyone even questioning whether it's AI or humans who are creating it.
I really like the interfaces you demonstrated for the mobile, but wondered if there will be some sort of opposition from the mobile vendor, especially Apple, to such sort of advanced experience above their default interface, because they may follow the paradigm if you don't lead it, just forbid it.
Yeah, I honestly do expect for them next week in their developer conference to announce some stuff around AI and chat as an experience. And that if I were to guess, I would say that.
Very
Cannot say
cool.
what kind of experience will be in the future for the web, but I am not absolutely happy with what I have here in 2024, and lots of different things I face could be done better. As a couple of examples, I often go to the website and support for very non-standard situations. And instead of getting me direct access to the support person, they try to put this chat box with lots of non-intelligent questions. Because if I reach this stage, it means I actually need help. Because other than that, I would be already finding the solution. As a good example, I was trying to replace a SIM card with my virtual mobile provider that allows to carry all the carriers, right? Because T-Mobile does not work in my area, I need to switch to Verizon. And all that type of evil, I try to deal with chat box, and it actually gave me the right solution, but it gave me solution to replace the SIM card from T-Mobile to T-Mobile, which does not solve my solution. Then I led to the support person. After 15 minutes of talk, they eventually told me, okay, buying your plan, contact us on the renewal date, and we will refund you. That's, again, not what I wanted to do. Then, having all the right questions and predicted all the right answers, I made another round to the support person in 2 weeks. And then I exactly dictated them what I wanted to do from them. And they just send me the free SIM card of the right format, free of charge. So if AI would be doing that from the first attempt, that's what actually I'm looking for.
No, I agree. I think so far chatbots have been done in a kind of like a gimmicky way. So it's like, yeah, we'll do a chatbot in a lot of scenarios. It's like we'll do a chatbot that wastes your time rather than actually adds value. And I think that
It does.
has to change.
So Mo, I'm gonna put you on the spot a little bit. What can we expect from Sitecore?
So there is a lot, yeah, there is a lot coming out with generative AI within Sitecore. So we're going to be announcing some things very, very soon. And then as we go towards Symposium, there's going to be much more announcements. But having said all that, I would also recommend for everyone to check our generative AI page on sitecore.com. I'll send the link to it. We do have a sneak peek to some of the stuff we're doing in like a demo video. So I would recommend for everyone who wants to know what we're thinking to check out that as well. And I can send that on the chat.
Awesome. Any hints that you can give us for what to expect?
Yeah, so I think the most important thing is we're thinking about how do we make what we call marketer first AI. And what we mean by that is how do we create AI that's actually useful for marketers rather than like one of the things when we talk to a lot of our customers is they want, if AI is going to help, it better help in their brand tonality, right? It's not just like going to ChatGPT and asking it. The second thing is how can it be fully integrated so it's seamless within the experience, but at the same time we're aware when AI is helping and when it isn't. So we make that distinction and that decision as a customer ultimately. And that's really what we're focusing on. So a lot of it is going to be around how do we create personalized experiences with AI? How do we help recommend for example, experiences in XM Cloud with AI? How do we help users find the right assets within Content Hub with AI? And much more around how do we actually help with the brand tone of voice when it's when we're thinking about content, we're thinking about experiences, and we're thinking about component generation, all of the above.
Very cool. Very cool. Thanks, Mo. That's definitely plenty to chew on. That's exciting. Looking forward to it.
Okay. With that in mind, let me introduce the next speaker. That is Scott Stoker. Scott is a senior solution architect at Proficient, and I'm very proud to work with Scott together. Lots of things learned from Scott. Scott will be talking about headless, which is specifically my topic. We have a separate headless user group for that particular development, which will be next week for the more advanced session. But Scott, I give it to you. So please introduce the topic.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I get to follow generative AI. Cool. But this is going to be very high level, talking about headless. Can somebody give me the ability to share? Not sure who's the host. Martin, is that you?
Okay, just a second.
Yep.
Your host.
Cool. All right, yeah, there we go. So what's the point of headless? So this is going to be pretty high level. You know, I'm not going to go into the weeds of the technology. I understand that we're going to do a XM Cloud 101 kind of session after this, and we'll probably go a little bit deeper into the technology there. Martin already kind of introduced me, but hi, I'm Scott. This is actually my first time attending the LA Sitecore user group. I'm out here in Ohio. 8:15. I'm starting to run out of steam a little bit here, but I promise I'll give you as much energy as I got. I have about 12 years of Sitecore experience. I think I've been working with Sitecore since 6.2 or something like that. And also, I'm pretty bad at PowerPoint, so this is going to be pretty basic. All right, so let's talk about headless. I think most of the Sitecore community has heard the word headless. Certainly everyone in this user group, like you all know headless, you know all about it. But really what I want to focus on with this talk is kind of talking to maybe the leaders or maybe your consultant, talking to potential clients, you know, trying to get budget to redo a website in headless. Like I want to focus kind of on the why. We know the what. The what is XM Cloud. It's, you know, the layout service. The how is, you know, the technology aspect, React, Next.js, maybe, you know, .NET Core SDK, things like that. We, as technologists, we kind of know that, right? But the why is how we convince our potential clients or our management or whoever that this is the right way to go, and this is kind of the direction the industry is going. This is a quote from me, probably circa 2018, 2019. Why would we build a website in all JavaScript when it's 95% content? I certainly think I was wrong. And I think the web has changed pretty drastically in the last, you know, 5-6 years. Just looking at the kind of sites that we build on Sitecore that I've experience with, there's a lot of interactive content, a lot of search. You know, think healthcare, right? Like finding a doctor, finding a hospital or a location, doctor's office, whatever. You think of a law firm, right? Searching for content in a dynamic way, searching for that particular lawyer with an expertise that your company needs or whatever. So I certainly think that things have changed, but I do think that there's still a lot of folks in the community, whether customers of Sitecore, development teams even, that kind of have this mentality, right? Like, why would I write my whole site in React, for example, when it's just content? So once again, staying basic, what is headless, right? Like headless is an architecture. It's a software design approach that separates an application's front end and back end, right? So in Sitecore, it separates the CMS part, the back end, you know, from the delivery of the end user experience, the website. The term headless CMS refers to the platform architecture where the content management is decoupled from content delivery. The traditional approach, CM, CD, kind of old school Sitecore, right? You've got Sitecore both in content management and in content delivery that actually serves the HTML. Headless is more API driven. But why is it better, right? So why do we care about headless? Why is Sitecore going down the kind of their headless journey? Why is most of the industry kind of following suit, right? So I think looking back at my quote, that I put up there, like, why would we do this? I think there's a lot of good reasons. And I think as advocates of Sitecore and maybe solution architects, Sitecore developers, Sitecore customers even, I think we all can do a better job of explaining why we're doing what we're doing. Like, why is headless better? So I'm going to go over some high-level reasons, just headless as an architecture, maybe not specific to Sitecore. And I'm going to kind of sprinkle in as I go some kind of Sitecore specific points. And once again, this was said earlier, right? Like, feel free to pipe in with any comments or questions as I go along. With that, I'm going to take a pause to drink. Does anybody have any questions or comments so far? I'm not hearing anything. All right, so the first point, flexibility. And specifically, because we have a separate back end and front end, it gives us the flexibility in the front end to use a large variety of technologies, especially if we're talking about, once again, headless architecture, not specific to Sitecore. That front end technology can be anything that's consuming the API that's delivering the content. In Sitecore, that typically does mean React Next.js. That's kind of the first class citizen. Sitecore also, provides SDKs for Vue, for Angular, and for even ASP.NET. ASP.NET 8 now, I believe. You also have technical flexibility, right? So traditional Sitecore CD models, you've got to host it a specific way. Azure App Services, or you need Windows VMs or whatever, right? In a headless environment for Sitecore, you have the flexibility to kind of host wherever you want. Obviously Vercel and Netlify is going to be very popular for a Next.js front end. But if you're using ASP.NET, right, like, you can maybe host that in a Linux Kubernetes container or whatever. So you have that flexibility that you didn't used to have. It's also easy to create customizing unique experiences across different platforms. And I'll kind of get to that a little bit later, but it's kind of delivering on the promise that for omni-channel that that Sitecore has been making for years now. I think this finally kind of delivers on it. Second point is performance, and this one I'm gonna have a couple slides on, because I think this is, for me, the most important thing. Because we have this decoupled architecture, everything is kind of API driven. You get that illusion of performance, at least for users, while retrieving content from the API. So your page loads almost immediately. We can take that further by optimizing the front end performance and doing things like serving static pages, incremental static generation, or Next.js has a number of ways to do that. The other frameworks do too, right? So the idea is basically serve as much static content as possible, and you get that really, really good performance. According to Google, and you can look up stats from like Amazon and a whole bunch of other companies, right? Like, the performance matters. The probability of a bounce increases 32% as page load time goes from 1 second to 3 seconds. I spent a whole bunch of time consulting at Humana. Like, I was in the trenches trying to get their traditional, Sitecore MVC website to load in 500 milliseconds. And it was just a battle. With a headless architecture, you can do better. So this is some screenshots of Lighthouse scores. for a handful of sites that we've built at Proficient. So obviously you don't get this kind of performance for free. Like just because you're doing headless, just because you're using Next.js, you have to know what you're doing. You have to focus on performance. But scores in the 90s aren't something that's possible in a traditional kind of Sitecore MVC or SXA MVC. Like it would almost be impossible to get scores this high. And why is that? Because this is what Sitecore does in a traditional MVC request execution pipeline. So this is actually from Sitecore's documentation, just a screenshot, right? And this isn't like bashing Sitecore or anything like that. Like this is just from a traditional MVC approach, all the stuff that has to happen to load the page, to build the page. Now, there's still a lot of stuff that has to happen with headless as well, right? Like the layout service is doing a lot of work. The difference is it's doing it in a way that is perceived faster to the user, and also it's doing it in a way, you know, kind of the technology, the way that we're using the technology is allowing us to serve static content rather than building this page like this, going through a pipeline every time a user requests that page. Did I say question?
Now, as I dropped a message,
Oh.
I recognize this diagram from a long time ago. What a throwback.
Right? I think it looks a little different than it used to, brighter colors, but yeah.
Yep.
All right, so another benefit, scalability, right? Live in the cloud. So cloud native. I think we can all agree that traditional Sitecore CM/CD we wouldn't classify as cloud native. You know, Sitecore's done a good job of changing their licensing recently to a subscription-based model. So we don't have like a license that says you're licensed for 2 prod servers or whatever. But even so, the scalability in a traditional Sitecore setup is maybe you have an Azure app service, or maybe you've got Kubernetes, but you kind of got to set that auto scale. You're still configuring a CDN separately. When we talk about headless, we talk about, you know, native content delivery networks like Netlify, like Vercel. Host your Next.js app there, and it's worldwide, right? And they've got the scale that you could never build yourself, and certainly not for the price that you get, you know, from Vercel.
Scott, would you permit me to interrupt you for a moment?
Absolutely.
I want to give a very brief anecdote. So let me show you this. What do you think is that? I believe many of you will say this is a flash card, SD flash card, right? That's it, partially. That's part of the answer. So this is a flash card I purchased 12 years ago. And the benefit of this card is that it says Wi-Fi. So initially purchased for my camera, I expected that it has Wi-Fi. As soon as it's plugged, it shares my flash drive by Wi-Fi. So what I realized actually is that how does it plug Wi-Fi? It actually has a chip. And after start digging into it, I realized that this basically is a small computer with operation system with very brief Linux on a board. So instead of doing that, I redeployed BusyBox distributive of Linux here, which allowed me to put a file downloader, file manager, like lots of other things here. But I didn't stop on that. That is actually the smallest rendering host ever existed. So it runs everything here. As soon as I plug it anywhere, it basically spins up Linux, and it has a Node.js environment. And basically, I run rendering host there. So this is in support of your statement about that you are very much flexible with the hosting. I want to say that even here, you can go with that.
Martin is hosting his website from a flash drive that goes in a camera.
And because it has Wi-Fi, you can actually connect by Wi-Fi directly to it. You don't have to, of course.
That's good. That's good.
Thanks for letting me in.
No problem. I like conversation. Omni-channel. So I touched on it a little bit earlier, right? But because all the content's being served via API, it's natural, right? Like the content could go to the web, it can go to your mobile app, maybe it goes to some other content repository, right? Like maybe something that AI is going to use or whatever. But it provides the headless architecture provides a unified content strategy, kind of for those consistent user experiences. So same content, maybe in the mobile app versus web once again. And because the content comes from an API, obviously it's very easy to use literally anywhere. Think of a place where you want to put it, the content can flow there, right? Like maybe your public facing content could go to your intranet. Or you can use content from the API to, send that content to a mail delivery or something like that. Really, the options are limitless. Composability, like the promise of being able to plug in whatever services you want, right, into your front end of the website. The headless architecture supports that natively. So you want to do personalization, you can definitely use Sitecore Personalized, or you could use some other competing service, right? Everything's going to be JavaScript based, right? It's basically you plug it in and off you go. And finally, kind of security. Honestly, I think this is another big one. So your attack vector is much smaller with a headless architecture, especially that content management, right? Like that's a server that's doing the processing. It's where your content lives. It's much easier to secure that API and then the front end, right? So that your attack vector is very small. I mean, what is an attacker going to get to in the Next.js app hitting Experience Edge, for example? There's not a whole lot that can be done there. Just a couple more things, and it kind of relates to what we've already talked about, but an improved developer experience. This is debatable, right? Especially if you're a .NET-centric team, and suddenly you want to do Sitecore headless, and you've got to learn React, right? So some would argue, React is a better developer experience than .NET. I'm not sure that I would, honestly, but you get to pick the technology though, especially like pure headless. Once again, talking outside of the realm of Sitecore headless, you get to pick what JavaScript frameworks you want to use. What technology stack you want to use to consume the content from an API. And then finally, the enhanced user experience. I already talked about performance. I had a few slides on it. Like, I think that's the biggest thing. From a user experience perspective, the reason that we want to build our sites in headless is generally we're able to get them much faster than we can with a traditional kind of CMS approach. Certainly faster than, Sitecore SXA, MVC, but just across different CMSs, right? Like headless is going to be faster than WordPress. It's going to be faster than Drupal and, the Acquias and the Optimizely's of the world. And, many of those CMSs are actually supporting headless as well. Like it's kind of an industry trend that everybody's going towards. So headless sounds good, right? But why Sitecore? Obviously, this is a Sitecore user group. I probably don't have to convince you all that, hey, Sitecore is a good idea, right? But there's a lot of different options, right? When you think of like pure headless, you're probably thinking of maybe Contentful or Content Stack. There's big players here, like I said, Optimizely, Adobe Experience Cloud, WordPress, there are a lot of different headless options. So outside of, hey, we know Sitecore, we already know Sitecore, why do I want to go Sitecore? Why do I want to pick Sitecore? I want to talk a little bit about hybrid headless. So there's this difference between pure headless and hybrid headless. Basically, the hybrid headless CMS combines the ease of use ease of use and structured content management capabilities of the traditional CMS, right? The Sitecore interface that we know and love, with the flexibility and API-driven approach of a headless CMS. So you kind of get the best of both worlds in a hybrid headless. Many of the pure headless options, the content is manageable, but authors can't change kind of the components on the page or the layout or how things look and feel on a page. That would require a code change in order to add maybe a new React component or something, right? With Sitecore, we have the layout service. Authors can still do everything that they're used to. They can build a page from scratch, and everything just kind of works. And like I said, Sitecore is still Sitecore. Authors still get to use the interfaces that they're used to. If you're doing like a lift and shift, right? Like your traditional Sitecore MVC now, and you want to go headless, that content can stay exactly where it is. And you can rebuild the front end of the website without having to throw away all of the content and start over. And you have options in how you do headless in Sitecore. So, probably the best option, and I'll get to this in a second. The best option is probably the far right, XM Cloud. The SaaS option, you don't have to worry about hosting anything or worrying about any of that, right? Like Sitecore hosts the CMS, maybe Vercel or Netlify will host your front end. You're purely SaaS. You don't have to worry about infrastructure anymore. But maybe you need to take baby steps as an organization. You're not quite ready for XM Cloud. That might be the left option, right? Like you self-host. That Next.js application, obviously it can live in a Vercel, but it can also live in an Azure App Service, right? Or Kubernetes. You can self-host that as well. And I'm actually working with a client right now that's doing that. They're rewriting their entire site in Next.js, but they're self-hosting everything. They're not quite ready to go XM Cloud. The in-between approach is, kind of hosting your own CMS, but then publishing to Experience Edge. So you get that advantage of the published content being on a CDN. And then your Next.js application would probably live in a Vercel at that point. So diving in a little bit more into XM Cloud, it has many benefits. Martin, you want to hop in?
Yeah, if you can make one slide back, please.
Yep.
I would like to suggest one more exotic option that is missing here, but it's quite very, very exotic. I would position it at the very left. So with that in mind, you actually can still remain on entirely ASP.NET MVC classical stack. If you want to go to Jamstack, it's not actually headless, right? But it's Jamstack. With the external solutions like Uniform, you can basically generate SSG content. So you statically generate the pages. Yep. And it actually supports personalization at some stage. So something similar that middleware does in Vercel for you. So with that in mind, if you are absolutely lazy or unwilling, or for some other reason you cannot pick up either of these three options, but you still want to improve your Lighthouse course, you can go to that Uniform direction. It's paid solution, so you need to find your own investigation about how to start with it and where to dig, but it's pretty possible. Thank you, Scott.
Yeah, I actually believe there's some Sitecore documentation somewhere out there too that talks about basically statically generating your site using Next.js, kind of as an in-between option before rewriting your application to headless. Anyway, so XM Cloud, I think that's the end goal for most of us that are in the Sitecore community. Like we see the benefits of XM Cloud. Organizations, they have other things they need to worry about, whether it's legal requirements or maybe being uncomfortable with updates just being pushed, things like that. But You know, I think the benefits of XM Cloud are pretty clear. To me, the page editor is the big one. Also, no more Sitecore upgrades. Like, let's stop investing, you know, budget dollars into Sitecore upgrades, and instead let's invest them, you know, somewhere that's going to impact the end user experience. So with that, I'll offer you that headless is the future. I think for a lot of us, it's the present, but you know, it's a matter of trying to communicate to stakeholders and once again, potential clients or leadership that headless is the future, and kind of here are some reasons why. So I walked you through all that. If anybody has anything to add, you know, please let me know. And I promise this isn't a Rickroll. This is a QR code that will take you to my LinkedIn page. Or maybe it is a Rickroll. You're going to have to see it, right?
Very cool, Scott. This is interesting. I have to say, once I tried headless a while back, being a .NET developer myself, right, coming from the .NET background, my initial thought was, I'm never going back to MVC.
Same, absolutely.
It was just night and day. It was, you know, a lot of things came for free. Like there's so much less effort involved in development. We have to write that data access layer, right? And in the backend code, a lot of things come for free with layout service, GraphQL, all those things. So it was mind blowing. I remember it was significant savings in terms of effort, cutting out the backend work, right? And then also being able to work with the latest tooling, right? The new IDE, the frameworks that help, you know, help us build faster and better solutions. So all those contribute to, you know, just overall dev experience. I mean, I really enjoyed it. I remember doing it for the first time, and I just never went back.
My experience, the most difficult was switching the paradigm of thinking. So with more than a decade, I would say 2 decades actually, of doing server-side development with IIS as a central part of it, we kept thinking that like server side is where the page is getting constructed and where you get all these integrations, and then it throw to the client and then it comes back. Yes, you can cache it. Eventually, whichever advanced caching technology, CDN and whatever you have, you still have this bottleneck of content delivery server of God knows how many 8 requests, or what is the number, magic number, but there's still a bottleneck, which you will not have with the headless development. And once you start thinking into a paradigm of static site generation or more advanced ISR, for example, with regeneration of the content, then you start thinking of, okay, the content is already done, it's already there, it's already cached, any integration happens on a head. And if you need to do some extra magic, that's where we have middleware, we have serverless functions, we have edge functions. So if you need to adjust into incline into request, that's where you use middleware, and so on and so forth. Once you start adopting this paradigm, you will never ever want to go back. And once again, we have this separate headless development user group. The next will be next week. So if you're interested, find me and follow. There's much more headless things in details. I'm giving it back to you, Scott.
I am done, unless anybody has any questions. So yeah, we can kind of move on to the whoever's next. I think I said a half hour, so I think I got about a half hour. So like I said, it's kind of late for me here, so I'm out of energy. I'm done, guys. I need a drink or something, right?
Very cool. Well, one thing I would add, so for on top of XM Cloud, so we're going to stay on that topic, but it's XM Cloud with headless. So Sitecore is, you know, if you're you may already know, may or may not know, but you know, for folks who are not specialized in React, that might be good news. So Sitecore is working on a library agnostic pages. Right, so right now only Next.js is supported, right, with pages, and it's just because of the SDK and the architecture. of the SDK and how it communicates back with other services. So they're working on a library agnostic or framework agnostic pages version. So it's going
But it still will be GSS based, so not ASP.NET Core.
Right. It's front end based. So you'll be able to work, choose the library of your choice, Angular,
Vue.js.
Exactly. It's going to be completely agnostic. Build it in, JavaScript if you want. The initial thought is it'll use the DOM, kind of similar to how AEM does that, I think. If I remember correctly, but it's so ultimately it relies on the final markup, right? So and whatever the technology behind it is irrelevant at that point. All right. So on that note, Madhu and Balaji, I'll hand it over to you guys to take us to XM Cloud 101. Who's going to present?
Bala will be sharing.
Okay. Excellent. Let me get you presenter rights. Oh. Wait, Scott, can you? Or yeah, looks like you're the host. Can you actually give Balaji presenter rights? The host rights are being passed on around. Or if you could make me the host, I'll just give him the presenter rights.
Yeah, hold on. Yes, let's make you the host again.
Okay, awesome. And
yeah, probably you can make me a co-host, so that way you still hold the host position.
There you go. And all right, see if you can present.
Yeah, I can.
There we go.
Okay. You able to see my screen?
Yep.
Okay. Thank you for the opportunity, Vasiliy, and the whole crew here, Martin. So we'll just walk through the XM Cloud 101. So if you're already have been working on it, feel free to chime in if you're missing anything, like add those topics. And we'll get started right now. Hey everyone, I'm Bala, and I've been a technology MVP for 4 times, also a Coveo MVP and DX MVP. Main work as a practice director for Sitecore at CEI, and you can follow me on my handles, and that's my blog. Madhu.
Thank you, Bala. Thank you, Vasiliy and Martin and Amir for the opportunity. Much appreciated. I'm Madhu Anbergen. I'm a 5-time Sitecore MVP and a Coveo MVP. Right now, I work for Infosys, but I used to work as a contractor. So if your project needs extra help, please feel free to let me know. And with this, let's get started. And today's agenda, we are just going to look into it. What is XM Cloud? And we have XM Cloud Plus. So we'll just see like what are the differences and why do we need to choose XM Cloud? What are its limitations? How do we terminology? What would be the transition path from XP to XM? What are the training options available? Certification, demo, and questions. With this, the XM Cloud, we know that from Sitecore, it's a SaaS product, and it was released last to last year sometime, and it's completely omni-channel and it's headless CMS. If your project is already on headless CMS, it's easy to move to XM Cloud because you already have the front end app is up and running and the back end is XM. So shifting from XM to XM Cloud is much more simpler than moving from XP to XM Cloud because XP is monolithic and we need to separate out all the personalization, XConnect, XDB, lot of stuff. But underneath, it's the same as XM. Instead of XM coming from the on-prem, it's actually coming from the cloud. So we don't need to worry about the upgrades. Actually, there is some sort of tweaks and things we need to do for upgrades, but it's very, very minimal. We all know that for the upgrades, how much it's actually painful. But now with XM Cloud, we don't need to go through this at all. And this makes it like easier for the marketers and developers because it's like with headless, we both can work on parallel, and it makes it easier for the marketers as well because everything is separate and they can work on their own and we can work on our own. And with XM Cloud, there is no more web database because everything is published to Edge. So that's the major difference in regular XP or XM with XM Cloud. And what are the differences between XM Cloud and XM Cloud Plus? XM Cloud Plus was announced in last year in Sarcon. So XM Cloud is nothing but equivalent to XP. It has like all the CDP, personalized, connect, and search. Like full capabilities of XP is what XM Cloud Plus is. So, so if your project need all the XP capabilities, then you could go for XM Cloud Plus. If not, then you could buy the XM Cloud and whatever you need, whether you need search or CDP or personalized, you could just buy that license only. And so what are the differences? This table column looks simple, but then it's actually took us some time because every day it's keep changing. And so far, this is what actually. So for XM Cloud, it's there is no search. For XM Cloud Plus, it is. But with analytics, it comes only the 30 days. But then with XM Cloud Plus, because we have all the capabilities, it comes unlimited. And integrations and connectivity, there is no connect as such. But for personalization, there is some basic information available. But then with XM Cloud Plus, it's full capabilities. The forms was introduced a couple of months ago, and it's available in both platforms. Why do we choose XM Cloud? Because we know that it's a flexible pricing and it comes from the cloud. So we don't, the scalability will be auto increasing based on the traffic. We don't need to like how in XP in app services, we scale up and down based on the traffic. Here, we don't need to worry about it because it auto scales. And it's in Azure. We know that it's known for the SLAs. It's like 99.999, like 12 nines or 16 nines. And it has interoperability and it's always on the cloud. We don't need to worry about so many things which we deal with every day on the XP. So these are the major reasons we should go for XM Cloud. With this, I'm transferring it to Bala.
Thank you, Madhu. Okay, so we'll just talk through the features here. So we do get automatic updates. So, XM Cloud is known for their feature releases. It's pretty much, I would say, mostly even at a rate of a weekly. So they do have fixes, more features. Pretty much they're doing a lot of updates automatically getting. So if you're in XM Cloud, you automatically get those updates. You don't need to do any more upgrades like what we used to do with like 10.2, 10.3, 10.4. You don't have to do that. So we have a scalable infrastructure since everything is SaaS-based. So you don't have to worry about the scalability aspect of it. And everything is being hosted in Azure, Sitecore Edge. So pretty much your page speed and performance, everything is coming directly out of the CDN. So it's much more faster compared to your regular monolithic XP. Next generation visual authoring. So XM Cloud comes with Sitecore pages that gives you the next level of authoring, like the newer generation pages editor and the UI. The entire editing experience is totally different. Dynamic personalization is supported. So you could personalize the data according to your, like if you're on XM Cloud, like basic level of personalization is supported, more like regional or time specific, or there are certain basic personalization that you could go with. Sites and page insights, site related analytics or page level analytics are available in the site and page insights in the platform. And if you're in XM Cloud, you get like 30 days of data that you can validate. If you're XM Cloud Plus, then you get unlimited. Depends on what licensing you are on. Built-in DevOps, so you're not dealing with having a build pipeline and do everything. Everything is out of the box. When the environment is being set up, you get access to everything. So you just go and check in your code and everything gets deployed. The global content delivery is done with Experience Edge, like I spoke before. It's the CDN, or there is no more web database. Everything comes through your edge. That's where your front-end head would be interacting with. Okay. So the next one area is licensing. So the licensing is mainly based on traffic, and it is no more based on the number of sites like what we used to have in our previous versions of Sitecore. So there is no more domain limits, so you can have unlimited domains. And it is all project based. We will look into what exactly is a project. And the edge bandwidth by default is 1 terabyte per month, or per month per project. And then if you need more edge bandwidth, then you could increase it or like buy more. And by default, the edge storage is 5 gigabyte, and that also can be increased. The concurrent author limit. So when you get licensing, you have to, by default, I believe it is starting around 25 users. But depending on the usage and licensing, you could say like I need 50 users or how many users, but there is a concurrent authoring limit. Vercel or Netlify can be bundled. So for when we talk about XM Cloud, it doesn't have any hosting for your head. So if you're hosting a Next.js application or a React application as your head, then the hosting is managed by you. So you need to either pick Azure Web Apps or do your own hosting. But if you would like to use Vercel or Netlify, then Sitecore could work on a pricing that could bundle the costs. So you're not dealing with Vercel or Netlify for their own licensing or signing a master agreement with them. So when it comes to support, there are 2 types of support. One is standard support, and the other one is a premium support. According to what you prefer, you could pick one. So let's talk about terminology. So we do have few terms that are common with XM Cloud. So when we talk, it's organization. When you say organization, it's more like from your app level. Yeah, it's turning off. So organization, when you're talking organization, it's the top level. For example, CA as a company is an organization. So below that, there might be different projects that can be created. Project in the sense one can be domestic and one can be international. And within that, then you can have multiple environments. So when I say project, like I said, domestic and international, when I say environments, it's going to be your dev stage or production. So those are your environments. So each project will have its own environment, but each project can have only one source code possible. So only one source code will be available, but you can have multiple sites within a project. Moving on, then the next one is Experience Edge, which is your kind of a CD. So there is no more content delivery or web database. So anytime you publish from your master database gets deployed or published into the Experience Edge, which is nothing but the CDN service provided by Sitecore themselves. So any data that you're trying, your head application or your Next.js or React, is going to directly interact with your Experience Edge to get the data. Pages is the editing experience, the new one available with XM Cloud. That's where you do all your editing for your pages. And you do have component builder, that's a front end as a service. So in a component builder, in simple terms, I could say you could just build a simple component, like I want an image, I want a text. So you're not waiting for your dev team to do everything. In component builder, you could just do a drag and drop and pick and choose, do your styling, do everything, publish it, eventually use that in your application. So if you have one-off components, you could easily use component builder to build that. The next one is personalize. In this case, personalization internally is handled by Sitecore Personalised, but you don't get access to that platform directly in the XM Cloud itself. You can do some level of personalization with certain rules. You could do that. Site and page insights, like we discussed before, all the analytics related data is available at the site level and also at the page level. Okay, moving on. So what are the limitations? When you look into XM Cloud, there is no more CD or identity roles. What does it mean? So you don't have content delivery. Basically, you have to interact everything with the Experience Edge. And then you also don't have identity roles, which in the past we would use it for Azure AD or having the users and everything. Here we use OAuth and then can be tagged with other identification services. publishable compute dependencies. This is something whenever you're publishing in XP or XM, we are used to publishing one single item. So that item gets published and we are good. But in XM Cloud, whenever you're publishing an item, it kind of computes the dependencies of all the items. That's how it takes a snapshot of that particular page at that particular, and then it publishes to the edge. So typically this takes a lot of effort and publishing time. And recently, like a month back, they came with a new publishing strategy that reduced this time by a lot. So that's what like we were talking about the updates and you get without an upgrade. So this is one of those things. So when they came up with the fix, now it's, for example, it used to take 40 minutes for a huge site, might take like few seconds, more like an intelligent publish, that a new approach that they came up with. So that kind of takes that, the time taken for the publishing, it reduced by a lot. So it doesn't have search. So by default, you are dependent on the head on your experience edge, which has all GraphQL endpoints. So that has, you would be using the GraphQL endpoints to do. There is no Solr behind the scenes to use. So when we talk about GraphQL endpoints, it has its own limits. So the complex queries and things like that. So there are limitations on GraphQL endpoints that you need to be aware of. It's not like wide open, you can do anything you want. There are certain limitations on the GraphQL endpoints as well. Limited personalization data, like XM Cloud, like we've discussed before, it has only 30 days of data that's holding. So you're not getting like unlimited personalization or setting like a profile cards or anything like that, what we are used to in XP. You don't get that unless you get a personalization, personalized licensing with the CDP or something. So that gives you more extended data. So there are no more modules. So in the past, we used to have like PowerShell extensions, or we used to have Coveo or a lot of other modules that you could go ahead and just install a package and then make use of it. We cannot do that anymore with XM Cloud. Content migration. So there is not DB support. So typically, whenever we do migrations in the past with XM or XP, we typically get the database, we do all the migration or upgrades and everything. We detach and attach the database and we should be good to go. But in this case, you couldn't do it. But one tip here is with XM Cloud, there is a workaround that you could achieve this. For example, if you're having a dev instance or a XM Cloud developer instance, typically that is connected back to your XM Cloud on the cloud for the the serialization. So you could attach a local database in your developer instance, and then eventually like copy content in between those things and use CLI to push the data back into XM Cloud. That's just a workaround. One of the friends who did it, he was mentioning that they were able to use that hack to push the data back into XM Cloud. There are no more custom pipelines. We are used to pipelines. We play with pipelines when we're dealing with data. Like we don't have those support anymore with XM Cloud. A simple quick architecture diagram from the Sitecore. Here in this diagram, we will start with the bottom up. So if you see there are content authors and marketers, they directly deal with pages, sites, explorer, and components. That's where they do all their authoring. If you move to the left, there are developers who communicate with the system with CLI, where they do the serialization push and pull. And also they use the projects and deploy app, like where they do the code check-ins, and then eventually that gets deployed into the XM Cloud. If you move on the left, there is a embedded personalization. Behind the scenes, it is using Personalised and CDP. We don't get access directly to Personalised or CDP, like directly access to that platform. Anything you have to access whatever is within the XM Cloud. But if you have a separate licensing that you have, or in future, if you would like to extend, you could purchase an additional license and then extend your data with Personalised and CDP. And all the web behavior directly from your front end directly goes back into the CDP and Personalised. That helps in your personalization. If you move up, like anytime in XM Cloud, all the data, once you publish the content, it is getting into Sitecore Experience Edge, which is the CDN. And then the application, in this case, it's Versal, that's your head, and that is directly querying your content from the experience at CDN and then pulling those data. And on the left, you see there is a Sitecore search. Typically, that is doing a web level crawler. So your Vercel application is public facing. So they're just using the crawler that pulls the data and then gets back into Sitecore search. In the same way, Vercel application with Sitecore search, like they can pull the data back through APIs and show your search experience. So how is the developer experience going to look like? So with the XM Cloud, there is no other option. You have to go with your Docker setup for your local. And then typically you connect it remotely to your cloud environment. So any environment in your local, if you need to do serialization, then everything has to be connected back into XM Cloud. So once you set up your local environment, the first thing you do is connect it back into XM Cloud through the CLI. And then you would be also shifting to the Sitecore content serialization. So you wouldn't be using TDS or Unicorn anymore. So you would be using Sitecore content serialization for push and pull, which is where you serialize your items from your local, doing your templates or items or anything, then you have to deal with that. Remote deployments through commits. So when you do your commits and stuff, like you can gatekeep, and that's how the deployment gets back into. And then with XM Cloud, you have XM Cloud CLI. That is what you use for creating projects and other activities with XM Cloud. So how does the transition path look like? Transition typically, this is more like a thought process that I put together. So the transition path to headless is the first and foremost. So if you're using ASP.NET or MVC, then the first and foremost, you need to get into headless. There are tools like Kaju AI, where that helps you transition your components and quickly get started with moving your MVC components back into React or Next.js. Then that gives you a head start. And even there is a recent partnership with Kaju and Sitecore as a recommended product for that transition. And so moving on to that, next one is Unicorn or TDS. If you're using, then you have to move to Sitecore serialization. That's what is supported by XM Cloud. And then assess all your XP features, what you're using today, and then see what are the alternate options that you can do. Because when you get into the composable, for example, personalization, basic stuff, you would be okay. But certain things like if you're using email or other features of XP, then you need to figure out, like, should I use Sitecore Send or SendGrid or some other tools that you could reuse. And you need to plan accordingly. And also all the pipelines or anything, then all those things would be lost. So you need to plan for that. The next one is integration. So if you already had integrations with Salesforce or Dynamics CRM or any other platforms within the company, then how are we going to achieve those things with XM Cloud? So you need to plan for all your existing integrations and come up with a plan for that. The last one is the forms migration. So Sitecore current XP or XM forms are not the same, which is launched with XM Cloud. So it cannot be migrated. So everything has to be rebuilt. So in that case, like, you need to come up with a plan, like how are we going to rebuild that? And you need to do that too. So training and certification. So it's more going to be instructor-led training. If you are able to afford that with your company, then I would highly recommend to take that. I personally took that training and it's been really, really good. You could do the business user or development fundamentals, or if you couldn't afford that, you could do the self-paced, go through the documentation, and then you can get started. With Sitecore XM Cloud, there is a certification that you could take once you're prepared with your training and stuff, and then work with the platform, get to it. And getting access to the platform is also not straightforward. Like, even partners don't get it unless there is a real need for a client that they're planning to do. So it's going to be a little bit difficult one, but if you have access, or if anybody has access, then probably they could give you access to learn and train, then it'd be much better. Okay, here with we'll stop. Considering the time, I'm not going through demo or anything, so open to speak through anything that we would discuss.
That's very cool. What are some of the gotchas that you guys have run into with XM Cloud that may not be obvious?
I personally, Vasiliy, have not worked on real projects, so I would let Martin answer that for you. But personally, looking at like existing clients, a lot of times it comes to about licensing cost and doing an entire lift and shift. A lot of clients are not like very well prepared. Even from moving from ASP.NET or MVC, when we propose this, a lot of clients thinks like, okay, you're saying like entire replatforming. Is it really worth doing it at this point? And especially the cost is kind of like doubling what they're doing right today. So that's kind of like a really hard sell when we are pitching to the clients. If somebody is moving, like buying Sitecore for the first time, it might work much, much better. But if there is a client who is on Sitecore for like 10 years, now you go tell them like, hey, you need to scrap everything. And then now let's build everything from scratch. And also you need to pay for that. And also you need to pay more additional cost for your SaaS platform. They're like, nah, not at this moment. Like, should I rethink? Is this the right? So it becomes a real hard conversation. We don't want to push anybody out of Sitecore, but that's the real difficulty that at least I ran into with a few clients.
Yep. And I think a lot of clients have been, starting to take a look around and put out an RFPs for platforms, as a result. And I think Sitecore has realized what's happening. And so the latest message from Dave Flanagan has been that Sitecore is going to continue supporting XM and XP. XM and XP is going to continue be a platform that sales team is going to sell, because for probably for a year or two, everything that Sitecore has been focused on in terms of new licenses has been XM Cloud. So now XM XP is coming back to new business development. And Sitecore is going to focus on content in general, just dominated content with the right tool. So XM XP is going to stick around, Content Hub and XM Cloud, whatever works best, right? So it's actually I think that's the best way to do it. So there's XM Cloud is a great platform, but it may not be a fit for everyone.
Every single one, yeah, agreed.
Exactly.
Especially when you're working with healthcare clients and stuff, like absolutely this is never going to happen.
And more specifically, when you need to be at certain geographical regions with data retention and storage policies, where they demand you to keep the data within perimeter of specific country, while we here operate with the only 5 data centers. So not always possible.
Yep, exactly. So it's sort of a breath of fresh air that Sitecore is changing the strategy. So XP is still alive and kicking, and some of the things that we can expect, just kind of hallway conversations, right? Some of the things that we saw at SockCon in Dublin in terms of the roadmap for XP, which is, by the way, the roadmap is laid out, I think, up to 2030 so far for XP. So that's the visibility, right? So it doesn't mean that it's ending at 2030. It's just,
yeah, there was a message around that. It's going to be like, we are done. We are not going to support XP anymore. But at least now it's being realized, and then the message is loud and clear. So we are also trying to convey those to the clients. Even a lot of clients like, hey, what's going to happen? We are not willing to, like, is there a different platform that we need to choose? So there was a lot of chaos, I would say, in the last year or two, the clients being in very uncertain. But at least now the message is loud and clear. And then we were able to, as a partner, communicate back to the clients and say like, hey, everything is good. Even today I had a call with the client. They were like, is this the real thing? Like, should I do an upgrade, or should we look for a SaaS platform, or what's going on? Like what should we do? Kind of a question. And then I have to know whatever you said with Dave mentioning all these things, and gave them a reassurance that, hey, you can stay with XP or XM, whatever you would prefer. You stick to that and you'll not be bothered anymore, kind of. There was a lot of sales push. I do understand from their aspect, but not everybody is ready to do that. And especially when you're saying moving from on-prem to SaaS, then you're pretty much asking like a 50% of increase in cost. Like, nobody's going to do that.
Oh, yeah.
If it's like a 10-15% or 25%, people might think about it. Hey, I would save this in the long run, but that cost was a little high. Like, at least few clients I took a quote and everything was pretty much like 50% and above.
Yep, exactly. So it's it's exciting. Well, what I recommend usually is just being pragmatic and going through an ROI exercise. Here are the benefits that you can expect. You guys were talking about, savings on the content authoring side, right? Through self-service with components, right? Pages. So there are productivity improvements, you know, as a result, content authors don't spend as much time. So all these things can be quantified, right? So how many authors do you have? How much time do they spend? Let's say, you know, we see a 50% plus improvement. Let's stay conservative. Let's say 25%, right? Let's calculate that out. Headless, moving to headless, again, improvements on the development side, future enhancement side, right? No upgrades. So all that can be quantified, and then you can create an ROI model, and then take a pragmatic look and see, does it make sense? You know, if there's no compliance requirements, some companies just have an internal compliance, right? Like a direction. We're going SaaS. That's, you know, it doesn't matter how much it costs. That's, you know, from the AEs, enterprise architects are pushing SaaS. We have to go SaaS, right? So how much does it cost? It doesn't matter. But for those who are not sure, that's usually the exercise that can shed some pragmatic light on, is it worth it, right? Does it make sense? Or should you continue staying on it? So
my client is with Content Hub. So recently we did the upgrade for them. So there are no more upgrades. Like if you're ever like the Content Hub, the latest version, if you move into, pretty much you're done with the upgrades. Like you don't have to deal with it anymore. So they were like, oh, is there a Sitecore version that we could go that way? And then no more upgrades. I was like, not happening on-prem, at least until you move into XM Cloud. And then it's like, how about we go to XM Cloud directly? It's like, no, you need to be in headless first. So you're replatforming entirely, and you need to see, is there a budget that you would be able to do that? If you don't want to do the upgrade, save the cost, and then do like a strategic planning for like next 5 years where you want to be, and then it might be worth doing this investment now, and then eventually it might pay back later. You avoid all those upgrades and those things. So yeah, it depends on what their needs are and what their budget and a lot of other questions. So I wouldn't say direct no to it, but it depends.
Exactly. Couple gotchas I shared from my side is, you know, with XM Cloud, based on some recent experience, project experience, when working with large amounts of content, like hundreds of thousands or millions of content items or pages, be careful. Make sure you account for how much time it's going to take to import and to publish the content, right? So that's got to really do some due diligence on analyzing content. There's some things around, let's say, the importer tool that Sitecore provides for moving, let's say, content from XM right into XM Cloud automatically. There's some things, like interesting things that could cause hiccups. Let's say if you have a couple sibling content items with the same name, for instance, that's going to trip up the tool. Right?
Let me step in with a couple issues as well. So I'm currently working on the upgrading website from a legacy XP 9.3 to XM Cloud. And all this content migration tool, they work from turn one. That's effectively when was items as resources introduced. So clean database, right? But when you need to do something more advanced, it's not that much straightforward. I think I hope to make a presentation by the next headless user group next week. If I don't do that, I will anyway briefly explain what I try to POC and what I managed to. So the exercise was to actually connect one database to another so that I could use PowerShell extension script or built-in tool. You know, if you go in the control panel of XP, you will be able to do like copy between database items, which actually takes all the versions. And that's what I want to have. I gave a concession 2 years ago about content, about Sitecore version upgrades, and that was covered in more details. It's recorded. But briefly, I try to pick up a database from XM Cloud and plug it to my legacy 9.3 instance database. But that would not work, simply because they are different databases. XM Cloud is XM Cloud database, 9.3 is 9.3. They have different schema in some way, so no. So I decided to do then other way around. So I wanted to plug the 9.3 database with all the content to XM Cloud. That was not an easy way to do so. First of all, cloud option is not available to you because that databases in cloud are locked out from you entirely. So the only way would be what? To plug it locally. and then grab the whole content, make serialization, and it will get shipped as items resources back to the cloud, and you promote it through environments. Easy? No. So first of all, you need somehow to map this database to your local container, and that's where you get all the type of evals. Effectively, I was able to do that, and I was able to register this as the separate database. So when you have, this drop down right at the right bottom side of your content editor or desktop, so that then you can switch between them. And once the database appeared here, then I was able to use PowerShell extension for copying the content. But plugging it to XM Cloud was itself not an easy exercise, because there are two options. Either you modify entirely your container setup, but again, the way how database mapped to XM Cloud, it has some magic inside, which is hidden from us. The databases need to be in a specific format, and it simply doesn't work. There is a separate magic around connection strings. There is a separate magic about how these tokens get expanded. So I would say I spent a day until I make it happen. And I plugged it hot, so I couldn't plug it cold. I plug it hot, so every time I down my containers, my database disappears. So I make a backup and automate kind of restore and restore database to my XM Cloud so that I will be able to do this migration. So long story short, I think I'll do a more detailed explanation walkthrough to that. But just in principle, that is possible. That is possible. And that's, I think, the right way to do. If you are on 10.1 or newer, you're lucky. If not, follow my pattern.
That's pretty cool. Are you going to host it on the flash drive again? On the flash card?
And then
I think
you
that's
can...
the same one. One of our presentations he was taking, Jared from American Eagle, he was talking through this, like attaching the local database, and they were migrating over like 300 sites into XM Cloud. And that's the kind of trick they were doing. But like you said, Vasiliy, it was a problem with the publishing exceeding 40 minutes or so. It breaks stuff. So they have to keep it within the time limits. I believe with the new updates, it should, like the new publishing updates that came through like a few weeks back, I think it should solve that issue.
Peaks and valleys with that one. Peaks and valleys. There's some things that got improved, some things are still the same. So as a general rule, I would say good architecture is going to win. So don't oversimplify it, as in don't like as in so ultimately it comes down to the number of relationships that exist within content items, right? So the more of those links you have in the database, the longer the publishing is going to take. So this is where content architecture is going to be really important. You can oversimplify it and publishing will fly, but that's not going to make the solution flexible enough, right? Or also on the other extreme, going way too granular with just referencing all the content from PageRank, right? So that's also not ideal in terms of that. So you've got to be really careful with XM Cloud on balancing out and creating the right architecture, the right mix of flexibility, and also publishing ability. But the team is actively working on it. I know that. So there's V1 publishing, there's V2 publishing, right? The new publishing available. I know new things are coming out on top of that. So, so stay tuned. One other thing I wanted to mention is another learning. So in terms of licensing, and specifically concurrent users. So, one license would be, one license cost is normally dictated by visits per year, right? So there are 17 tiers. And then from there on, there are restrictions on the number of domains, number of non-prod environments, and concurrent users. Concurrent users are generally limited to roughly about 50. Can't really find that information anywhere until you're
I think the starting is 25. Am I wrong on that, or?
Starting is 25.
Yeah.
I think it's.
You're saying the max limit is 50?
You're gonna be okay up to 50.
Oh.
And then from there on, and again, double check, because
Yeah, I agree.
The team sometimes tweak the specs on the XM Cloud behind the scenes to improve performance. So and you're going to be up to 50 roughly. if with content authors all coming from the same region, let's say the US, right? You can go even higher if your authors are coming from different regions. So that's an interesting one.
Okay.
So, yeah. So, but again, we're experimenting with that right now. If you have more concurrent users, a solution to that is to use multiple projects.
Multiple projects, okay.
In XM Cloud, yeah.
I want to add a few more bits to the publishing piece, Vasiliy, you mentioned. So couple more things. One of the things is sometimes I tell my editors just to publish the whole site, because that guarantees things will get published faster than anything else, and with all the bits that needed. And the second comes from the first. You will have to use workflows and publishing restrictions with that. So even without that first part, publishing all sites, sometimes you may experience some phantom publishings with Experience Edge. There were numerous precedent on that. So to guarantee, if you have a content that you want to work on, and if you want to guarantee it doesn't get earlier than you need it, you have to be using workflow. And
That's a good one.
I made it a rule of thumb, use workflow, just that.
There you go. Awesome. Well, Bala, Madhu, great presentation, guys. Thank you so much. Walking us through it.
Thank you. It was wonderful talking. Thanks for the opportunity.
Excellent. Well,
Thanks
any
all
last...
for the wonderful opportunity.
Oh, thank you, guys. Thank you. Thank you for helping support the user group.
Sorry, Vasiliy.
No, you're good. So anything,
No
Mark, Amir, anything from your end, guys, as we wrap it up?
Yet another good user group.
All right. Well, so I think the symposium session announcements are probably going to come in June, mid to end June, I think I heard. So
June 18th, I believe.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's going to be interesting. So looking forward to that. Sitecore is hosting some more events this year, so stay tuned for that. And we'll speed up through user groups throughout the year. This is our first user group of this year. We kind of set on, and then we had to move it again. Things didn't quite align, but thanks for those. Thanks to those who made it. We're going to speed up, so probably next user group we're going to have in just a matter of a couple of months. So see you guys then.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Awesome.
Good night,
Thanks,
everyone.
Vasiliy.
Thank you.
Have a good evening.
Bye-bye.